What's going on, everybody? Cleepus Tech here, coming back at you with another video. In this video, we're going to be doing a quick comparison between the Cricket Ovation 3 and the Motorola Moto G Pure. Now, before we go any further, as always, I do want to remind you to hit that subscribe button, and in case you want to learn more about either phone individually, I will be linking to several other videos about each of them in the description, as well as some information about pricing, availability, and some of my favorite smartphone accessories. But with that being said, let's get into it. So with the Cricket Ovation 3, we're getting a really large 6.82-inch IPS LCD display with a 720p resolution, a PPI of 246, and an aspect ratio of 20.5:9. And one really cool thing about this phone is that despite having a really large display, the design itself is so slim that the phone itself doesn't even feel bulky. So you get the benefits of having a really large display, but at the same time, it's still decently comfortable to hold, so definitely a nice thing here. Now with the Moto G Pure, we're getting a 6.5-inch IPS LCD display. This phone also has a 720p resolution, a PPI of 270, and an aspect ratio of 20:9. So in general, between the two, for being really entry-level phones, both phones do have really good displays, but if you do value having a larger display, then of course, the Cricket Ovation 3 will have an advantage. Aside from that, again, for what they are, things do look decently good. Sure, the image isn't really amazing or anything, but of course, these are really entry-level phones, so you can really only expect so much. I would say for the average user, you will get a good experience with either device. Now for storage, both phones have 32GB of internal storage with microSD card expansion, which honestly is really too bad because in this day and age, 32GB really isn't a whole lot. No matter what you're doing on your phone, whether you're more of a power user who tends to have more apps, or you're more of a light user, in any case, 32GB is going to fill up pretty quickly. So unless you're using your phone for pretty much the bare minimum, storage on these phones is going to be pretty tight. That being said though, at least both phones do have microSD card expansion, so if you have a lot of photos and videos, maybe music for example, you can always offload that stuff onto a microSD card, and that is going to help a bit. But still, I feel like at this point in 2023, even with really affordable phones like these, we should really be getting more internal storage. For security features, both phones have Face Unlock, and they both have fingerprint scanners right here on the back, so more of a classic spot, really can't go wrong with it. And I've definitely noticed at this point in 2023, even really entry-level phones have both fingerprint scanners and Face Unlock, whereas maybe back in 2021, for example, in this price range at least, with these $100 or so phones, that was definitely a bit less common, so that is a nice change to see here. But starting with the Cricket Ovation 3, let's give the fingerprint scanners a try. There we go, one more time. And there we go. And now for the Moto G Pure. There we go, one more time. And there we go. So as you can see, real fast and responsive, no issues at all. And again, both phones do have Face Unlock too, so if you want to use that instead, you always can. For the camera setups, both phones have water drop notch front-facing cameras, 8 megapixels with the Cricket Ovation 3, 5 with the Moto G Pure. Then on the back, with the Cricket Ovation 3, we got a triple camera setup here, with a 13 megapixel main camera, a 5 megapixel ultra-wide camera, and a 2 megapixel macro camera. With the Moto G Pure, we got a dual camera setup here, with a 13 megapixel main camera, and a 2 megapixel depth sensing camera. As far as features go, on one hand, with the Moto G Pure, there's really not a whole lot here. Sure, it has a decent main camera for being a $100 phone, and if you're just taking a couple photos here and there, while you're not going to get amazing quality or anything, it's still at least going to get the job done. But again, there's really no features, no ultra-wide camera, no macro camera, nothing like that. But that being said, of course, if you don't really care about those features, then that's not really going to be a big deal. On the other hand, with the Cricket Ovation 3, well again, we're not going to be getting amazing photo quality or anything. We at least get a decent amount of features with both an ultra-wide camera and a macro camera. So if you're taking a lot of photos and you don't necessarily need the best quality, but you do still want a decent variety of features, in that case, the Cricket Ovation 3 will be a better choice. But that being said, if you're not really concerned about the camera at all, maybe you're just using stuff like Snapchat for example, where the photo quality doesn't really matter a whole lot, in that kind of situation, the Moto G Pure will at least get the job done. Now, as far as RAM and processor go, with the Cricket Ovation 3, we're getting 3GB of RAM with the MediaTek Helio A25 processor, and with the Moto G Pure, we're also getting 3GB of RAM with the MediaTek Helio G25. For the overall performance, neither phone is really fast per se, which probably doesn't come as a surprise. But that being said, the Cricket Ovation 3 is significantly faster than the Moto G Pure, so if you're going to be on your phone a little bit more, then definitely keep this in mind. That being said though, for really basic activities, which is honestly what these phones are meant for, either phone will at least get the job done, and if you're not going to be on your phone all day or anything, the Moto G Pure, while again definitely not being fast by any means, it's still at least going to be good enough to get the job done. Now that being said, I did run benchmark tests on these phones using Geekbench 5. And here are the scores I got. So again, as you can see, the Cricut Ovation 3 does have a significant advantage, being quite a bit faster than the Moto G Pure. But again, keep in mind, despite this difference, the Cricut Ovation 3 is still not really a fast phone, so definitely don't get it expecting amazing performance. But for more regular activities like web browsing, social media, streaming the occasional video here and there and stuff like that, either phone will get the job done. It really just depends on how much you're using your phone. On one hand, if you're not going to be on your phone a lot, the Moto G Pure is probably going to be perfectly fine. But on the other hand, if you're going to be on your phone a little bit more, then the Cricut Ovation 3 is probably going to be a better choice. Now these phones actually have the same batteries, both having 4000 mAh batteries that support 10-watt fast charging. So on one hand, not the best batteries you can get, but on the other hand, they're really not bad. So if battery life is maybe not your top priority, but you need a phone that has decent battery life at least, either phone will be perfectly fine. Now, when it comes to software, both phones do have Android 12, so sure, it's not Android 13, but of course, these are really low-end phones, and Android 12 is at least decently newer. So considering that, I don't think it's really bad here. As far as updates and stuff like that go, with the Cricut Ovation 3, I can definitely say I really doubt this phone is going to be getting any major updates. But with the Moto G Pure, this phone technically did start out with Android 11, so who knows, maybe it might get Android 13. I'm not really counting on it, but it definitely is possible. Either way, if it's really important to you to have the latest version of Android, then I wouldn't go with either of these phones. But if you want something at least decently newer, then they will at least get the job done. As far as other features go, the Cricut Ovation 3 does actually have NFC, whereas the Moto G Pure doesn't. This is definitely something I'm starting to notice in 2023. More and more lower end phones like this are getting NFC, which is definitely a great thing because NFC, in case you don't know, is the main technology behind contactless mobile payment services. So if you like to use tap and pay, which is constantly becoming more and more popular and widely used, then you will need a phone with NFC. So again, definitely nice that we're starting to see more lower end phones that have NFC, but with the Moto G Pure, seeing that this phone did come out in 2021, for a phone, especially an entry level phone, it is a bit older, and at the end of 2021 when it originally came out, most lower end phones didn't have NFC, so this phone not having it really isn't a surprise. But that being said, if you do like to use tap and pay, then you are going to want to go with the Cricut Ovation 3, because again, this phone does have NFC, whereas the Moto G Pure doesn't. But in conclusion, which of these phones is better? In general, in pretty much every way where there's actually a difference, I would say the Cricut Ovation 3 is the better device here. As you can clearly see, it has a much larger display, a slightly better form factor at 20.5 by 9 versus 20 by 9, and despite this, the Ovation 3 honestly feels just as slim as the Moto G Pure, so that's definitely a nice benefit too. It also has a better camera, with an ultra-wide camera and a macro camera, whereas the Moto G Pure has pretty much no extra features. The Ovation 3 again has NFC, and the performance is noticeably better too. So overall, if you're looking for a really affordable entry-level phone for more basic activities like web browsing, social media, streaming the occasional video here and there and stuff like that, you like to use tap and pay, and you also want a decent camera setup with some good features, then the Cricut Ovation 3 is going to be a pretty good choice for you. But this concludes my comparison between the Cricut Ovation 3 and the Motorola Moto G Pure. Again, if you want to learn more about either phone individually, definitely check out the video description where we'll be linking to several other videos about each of them, as well as some information about pricing, availability, and some of my favorite smartphone accessories. But that's it for this video. If you enjoyed it and found it useful, be sure to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to follow Kalip's Tech on Twitter and Instagram. And as always, I will see you in the next video.